November 28th, 1944. Berlin-Dahlem. Beneath the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics. The air tastes like brick dust and wet coal. A siren fades into the distance, leaving the city to its own bruised silence. Somewhere above, a roof tile skitters down a gutter like a coin on stone. In the cellar corridor, a single bulb swings on its cord, throwing light in pulses across a row of doors stenciled with numbers that no longer match the rooms behind them. The institute still stands on paper. In reality, it is a half-alive organism, bandaged with sandbags, its windows taped, its hallways rerouted around collapsed masonry. Werner Heisenberg walks with his shoulders slightly hunched, not from age, but from habit. Every man in Berlin has learned to make himself smaller. His coat is dusty at the cuffs. His fingers smell faintly of chalk and smoke. He pauses at a door where the paint has been rubbed away by too many hands, then knocks in a pattern that has become their unspoken password. Inside, a narrow meeting room has been carved out of storage space. A blackboard leans against crates marked with chemical symbols. An oil stove ticks as it warms, the metal expanding in small complaints. 2 cups sit on a table, their rims stained brown from ersatz coffee. Walter Gerlach stands near the stove, civilian suit under a military coat. The Reich Research Council man who has learned to speak both languages, science and survival. Kurt Diebner is there too, the Army Ordnance veteran, posture straight even when the ceiling is low. On the table lies a map of Germany with rail lines inked and re-inked, a web of routes that are now targets. No one begins with pleasantries. They all know the ritual. You wait for the messenger. Boots scrape in the corridor. A young lieutenant enters, breath steaming in the cold air he drags with him. He does not remove his cap. He sets a thick folder on the table as if it might bite. The folder is gray, the edges soft from handling, but the wax seal is fresh. It has been carried fast. Gerlach breaks it open. Papers slide out, typed sheets with margins too clean for Berlin. The sort of formatting that suggests they were made in an office that still has electricity all day. The lieutenant does not explain where it came from. He does not need to. Everyone in the room understands that information now travels by strange rivers through neutral consulates, through businessmen in Stockholm, through whispers from Switzerland, through interrogations in the West, through the ruins left behind by bombed trains. Heisenberg leans forward. The swinging bulb throws his shadow across the pages like a moving curtain. You can almost hear his mind shifting gears, trying to separate rumor from measurement. The first sheet is an overview, and the words hit like cold water. A massive American industrial network. Not a single laboratory, not a single institute, but a continent-sized machine. Multiple sites, multiple plants, multiple stages of production. Gerlach reads aloud in a low voice. Each phrase a hammer blow. Reactor complexes producing new elements in quantity. Enrichment plants turning raw material into something sharper. Fabrication laboratories handling metal so dangerous it demands special glove boxes and sealed rooms. Remote ranges where the device itself can be tested far from cities, with towers and bunkers built for the blast. Diebner's jaw tightens. He does not like abstractions. He likes numbers, tonnage, output. He starts flipping pages, scanning for the parts that matter to a man who measures war in trainloads. There are references to places, some familiar, some not. Oak Ridge, Hanford, Los Alamos. Names that sound like railway junctions, and that is exactly what they are, except the rails are not carrying coal or troops. They are carrying the future. Heisenberg's eyes stop on a line describing power, not theoretical power. Electrical power allocated to a single purpose. The figure is so large it looks like a misprint. He looks again. It is not a misprint. In the cellar, the oil stove ticks louder, as if nervous. Above them, Berlin creaks in the wind. For a moment, the men do not speak. They listen to the building and to their own breathing. Because if the Americans truly have reactors and enrichment plants running at scale, then the problem is no longer physics. The problem is time and industry. It is concrete and copper and uninterrupted supply. It is the ability to build not one machine, but a dozen, and to feed them until they produce something that cannot be caught up to by brilliance alone. Gerlach finally looks up. His face is pale. Not from fear exactly, but from recognition. This is not a rival laboratory. This is a nation turning itself into a factory for a single weapon. And in that instant, in a cellar lit by a swinging bulb, the German nuclear effort feels very small. A handful of men, a few scattered experiments, heavy water that arrives late, if it arrives at all. Uranium cubes stacked like a child's toy in a mine tunnel in the south. Heisenberg rests a hand on the folder, steadying it as if it might slide off the table. The room smells of oil, paper, and damp wool. Outside, the war continues. Inside, a different kind of defeat begins to take shape. Not with surrender papers, but with calculations that no longer lead anywhere. Heisenberg does not speak at first. He studies the pages the way a pilot studies cloud cover before a flight. Not for beauty, but for threat. His thumb slides along the edge of a paragraph describing separation methods. The words are careful, written by someone who understands enough to hide what matters. And yet the sheer structure of the thing leaks the truth. Multiple pathways, redundancy, insurance against failure. Gerlach clears his throat. The sound is small in the cellar room, if these reports are correct. He says, then they have solved the engineering problem. Diebner answers without looking up. They have solved the procurement problem. That is worse. He taps the sheet with a knuckle. Twice, the way artillery officers used to tap a map when assigning fire. It is the numbers he wants. Not a formula, not a diagram. Numbers that imply physical reality. How much electricity? How many workers? How many acres? How many rail sidings? The lieutenant remains by the door, rigid. His eyes flick from face to face. He senses what the papers mean even if he cannot interpret the technical language. The tone alone tells him, in this room, men who once argued fiercely about neutron cross-sections and moderators now talk like accountants at a funeral. Heisenberg lifts a page and holds it closer to the bulb. The light turns the paper almost translucent. There are lines about reactors, about irradiated fuel, about chemical separation. There is a phrase that makes him pause. A production pile. Not an experiment, not a laboratory unit, a production pile. His mind involuntarily supplies the scale. Graphite blocks, cooling pipes, shielding, cranes, an entire building, and then another building beside it to dissolve and separate and purify. And behind that, storage, safety, security, a whole ecosystem. He pictures it with painful clarity because he knows exactly what it would take. The Americans, apparently, have already paid the price. Diebner flips to a section mentioning a vast enrichment plant. He reads the lines, then looks at Heisenberg with a hard expression. How long would it take us to build something like that, even if we had peace and steel and power? He asks. Heisenberg does not answer immediately. He turns the question into a calculation, as he always does. He imagines requisition forms. He imagines arguing for copper and aluminum while the Luftwaffe begs for aircraft wiring. He imagines asking for thousands of skilled machinists while the army drafts them. He imagines trains bringing components across a bombing landscape where every bridge is a question mark. Years, he says finally. Several. Gerlach nods once. Slowly. He does not look pleased to be right. He looks older than he did a minute ago. The report mentions fabrication laboratories. Gerlach says, handling the material. That means they have it in quantity. That means they have solved not only separation but metallurgy. Metallurgy. The word hangs heavy. It is one thing to produce a few grams of something new. It is another to cast machine and assemble it into a weapon with tolerances that cannot be forgiven. Heisenberg imagines the workshops required, with filtered air and special tools and men trained not to breathe the dust. He imagines a whole safety doctrine built around an invisible poison. Diebner leans back in his chair. The wood creaks. He stares at the ceiling as if expecting it to crack open and reveal the sky. They are building a bomb, he says. Not a reactor. Not a demonstration. A bomb. No one corrects him. In the past, they might have argued about whether the Americans could do it in time, whether their scientists were capable, whether their industrial chaos would defeat them. Those arguments have always been laced with a kind of professional pride, a belief that Germany still held the intellectual lead. Now the folder on the table smothers that pride. Gerlach reaches into the folder again and pulls out a separate memorandum, shorter, with fewer technical details. He reads it silently, then passes it to Heisenberg. A note about testing ranges. Remote, controlled, built for a blast. Heisenberg's lips part slightly. You can see the moment his thoughts jump from industry to tactics. A weapons testing range is not built on a whim. It is built because someone is confident the device will detonate, and they want to measure it. They are past the point of theory. They are in the realm of certainty. The lieutenant finally speaks. Voice careful. Herr Professor, the ministry asks for your assessment. Is it possible they exaggerate? Heisenberg looks up. His eyes are tired, but sharp. Exaggeration tends to add flourishes, he says. This does not. This reads like infrastructure. Diebner gives a short laugh without humor. Infrastructure is harder to fake than equations, he says. You can lie about a calculation. You cannot easily lie about a power station feeding one plant. Gerlach folds his hands. In another life, he might be presenting to a committee with polished tables and neat graphs. Here, his fingers are stained with ink and soot. We must consider what to tell Berlin, he says. The word Berlin does not mean the city above them. It means the ministries, the men who still believe in miracles, the men who assume science is a switch that can be turned on at will. It means a system that has demanded results while starving the very conditions that produce them. Heisenberg hears in his mind the questions he has been asked so many times. When will it be ready? When will we have the weapon? How soon? How decisive? He looks at the folder again, at the American plants described with cold, factual language. He thinks of their own program, experiments scattered between institutes, rivalries, fragmentation, the heavy water project that has been bombed and bombed again, uranium cubes wrapped in paperwork and transported like contraband, a reactor design that still whispers uncertainty. Heisenberg's voice drops. We are not simply behind, he says. We are in a different race entirely. The lieutenant swallows. He understands enough to feel the floor shift beneath him. Diebner points at the map on the table, the rail lines inked like veins. Even if we had the idea tomorrow, he says, what would carry the parts? What factory would build them? What power would run them? What air raid would spare them? Silence again, thicker now. The bulb continues its slow swing. Above them, a distant thud rolls across the city. Not close enough to shake the room, but close enough to remind them that time is not a concept. It is a bomb pattern. Gerlach gathers the papers, neat again, as if order might protect them. We will write an assessment. He says, carefully. Heisenberg watches him, and he knows what carefully means. It means truth wrapped in language that will not get them shot. It means admitting impossibility without using the word. It means telling men who demand miracles that there will be none. He takes a pencil from his pocket. the stub of one he has used until it is almost too small to hold. He begins to write on a blank sheet, not equations, but a list of requirements: electricity, copper, skilled labor, secure sites, time. As the list grows, it becomes its own verdict. The pencil scratches on paper in short strokes, like a match trying to light in damp air. Heisenberg writes the list twice, the second time stripping it down to essentials. Electricity measured in power stations, not laboratory outlets. Copper by the ton, not by the spool. Precision machining protected from shock waves and dust, a secure site that can survive nightly raids, and above all, time. He pauses, listening. Somewhere above, footsteps hurry along a corridor, then fade. A door slams. The institute breathes with the city. Gerlach reads over Heisenberg's shoulder. He does not correct the science. He corrects the tone. He crosses out words that might sound like accusation. He replaces blunt statements with neutral ones. Not impossible, but not feasible under present conditions. Not hopeless, but not likely to reach a decisive stage before war's end. Diebner watches them with a soldier's impatience. Write it so they understand, he says. They do not read footnotes. Heisenberg's hand tightens around the pencil. In his mind, he sees a man in a ministerial office, warm and well lit, reading this memo while the city shakes. He imagines the reaction: anger, denial, a demand for a shortcut, a wonder weapon, a miracle. He has heard it too many times. Gerlach folds the pages into the folder again, but the paper feels heavier now, as if the truth has weight. We deliver it personally, he says. That afternoon, Heisenberg rides in a staff car through streets lined with broken glass. The sky is a dull slate color. A line of civilians moves along the sidewalk with handcarts, their faces gray with exhaustion, each cart piled with salvaged wood or bricks. Soldiers stand at intersections with rifles slung, eyes scanning the sky more than the traffic. The ministry building is intact enough to look solid, though its windows are patched and its walls darkened by smoke. Inside, the corridors smell of damp overcoats and old tobacco. Typewriters chatter like insects. Men with armbands and briefcases move quickly, as if speed alone can defend them. They are led into an office where a senior official waits behind a desk too clean for the city outside. Maps on the wall show fronts that have shifted inward like a tightening noose. The official is polite, almost relaxed. He offers coffee. It is thin and bitter. Gerlach places the folder on the desk. Heisenberg stands slightly behind, hands clasped, watching the man's eyes as he reads. Diebner sits only because there is a chair, and even then his posture is stiff. The official reads the first page, then the second. His expression changes slowly, as if he is trying to refuse it by force of will. He looks up. These reports, he says carefully. You are certain? Heisenberg answers in the simplest terms he can. The scale described is consistent across independent channels. He says, reactor sites, enrichment plants, fabrication. It is not one effort. It is a system. The official's fingers drum once on the desk. Outside the window, a bicycle passes in the courtyard. The rider hunched against the cold. What does it mean? He asks. For our work. Diebner speaks before Heisenberg can shape a diplomatic reply. It means they have industry and we do not, he says. It means they can build and feed machines that we cannot protect. It means their program has crossed into mass production. The official flinches slightly. Not at Diebner's bluntness, but at the implication, mass production. The phrase belongs to aircraft and tanks, to assembly lines that do not stop. If it now belongs to nuclear work, then the balance is beyond argument. Gerlach leans forward, voice low, as if sharing a secret. Our path would require resources that the Reich cannot allocate now, he says. Even with full priority, even with complete unity, even with time we do not have. The official looks at Heisenberg again, searching for a loophole in the professor's face. Is there any chance, he asks, that they are mistaken, that the Americans will fail? Heisenberg holds the man's gaze. He thinks of the power figures, the redundancy, the test ranges. Chance exists, he says, because all projects can fail. But the architecture they have built is designed to keep going even when parts fail. The office feels suddenly colder. The official sets the memo down as if it burns. For a moment, no one speaks. A distant siren begins to rise, far away, like an animal sensing weather. When the official finally speaks, his voice has changed. It is not the voice of a man asking for progress. It is the voice of a man trying to decide what to do with bad news that cannot be unlearned. This assessment will be forwarded, he says, discreetly. Gerlach nods. Heisenberg hears what discreetly means. It means the truth will travel upward in sealed folders, through hands that tremble, to men who still believe in turning points. And somewhere along that climb, someone will quietly admit what cannot be said aloud. In the corridor outside, the siren grows louder. Heisenberg adjusts his coat and steps back into the moving machinery of a collapsing state, carrying in his mind the image of distant American plants humming with power, untouched by the nightly firestorms that have become Berlin's clock. The air raid that night comes in waves. Heisenberg listens from his apartment as the first distant detonations roll like thunder, then grow sharper, closer, as if the city is being struck with a giant hammer. The window glass trembles. The blackout curtains flutter with each concussion. He sits at a small table, the same pencil in his hand, and tries to write, but the sound forces its way into every thought. At midnight, when the guns finally fall quiet, he walks out into the stairwell. The building smells of smoke and damp plaster. A neighbor passes him carrying a bucket of water, eyes blank. On the street, fire crews move like shadows around a burning roof. In the red light, faces look carved from ash. And somewhere, in a ministerial office that still has its lamps, someone reads the memo again, not to argue with it, but to accept it in the only way bureaucracy knows how, by filing it, stamping it, and letting it change decisions without announcing itself. Within days, the conversations shift. At the Institute, the usual quarrels about moderators and geometries lose their sharpness. In the morning meetings, voices are lower. People talk about supply lines, about evacuation plans, about which equipment can be moved and which must be abandoned. A technician asks if the vacuum pump should be hidden. A clerk asks if the records should be burned. Gerlach visits in civilian coat and scarf, the collar turned up. He brings no fanfare, only a small notebook and a tired expression. He sits with Heisenberg in the cellar room again, the same bulb swinging, the same oil stove ticking. The ministry did not explode. Gerlach says, "That is something." Heisenberg gives a thin smile. "They will not shoot the messenger," he says. "Not yet." Diebner arrives late, snow on his shoulders, eyes reddened from wind or sleeplessness. He drops into a chair and sets down a new piece of paper. "I have spoken with Army Ordnance," he says. "They want to know if we can accelerate anything, any shortcut, any practical effect." Heisenberg does not ask which officer. Names do not matter now. The request is always the same, a hand reaching for a lever that does not exist. "Tell them," Heisenberg says, "that physics does not negotiate with the front lines." Diebner snorts. I said something similar. He replies, "They did not enjoy it." Gerlach opens his notebook. There are lists inside. Not of experiments, but of people. Names, addresses, assignments. Men and women who have worked on the uranium project and now face a country shrinking around them. The reality is spreading. Gerlach says, quietly, people are preparing for the end. Heisenberg looks at the blackboard, where an old equation still sits, chalked months earlier. It seems like a relic of a cleaner world. He thinks of the American plants described in the reports, each one enormous, each one protected by distance and resources. He thinks of their own work, scattered and fragile. A reactor experiment here, a heavy water shipment there, always delayed, always threatened, always defended with excuses. He remembers something an older colleague once told him: war does not reward the smartest, it rewards the largest. In December, Heisenberg travels again, this time south. The train crawls through a landscape of snow and broken tracks. At stations, soldiers with bandaged hands stand smoking, staring at nothing. Refugees crowd the platforms, clutching bundles tied with string. A woman carries a bird cage with no bird, just the cage, as if the shape of home matters more than what is inside it. Heisenberg's destination is a hidden site where part of the uranium work has been moved, away from the constant bombing. The facility is in the countryside, guarded by young men with rifles who look too thin for their uniforms. Inside, the air is cold and smells of metal and damp earth. A small team works by lantern light, careful, methodical, trying to keep the experiment alive. They show him the uranium cubes, heavy and dark, each one stamped and tied. They show him the apparatus, pipes and vessels assembled with what tools they can find. They speak with pride, with the stubbornness of craftsmen who refuse to admit their craft is obsolete. Heisenberg listens, and he feels a kind of sorrow that surprises him, not for the regime, not for the war, but for the human effort, the hours, the calculations, the compromises, the arguments, all of it now dwarfed by a distant industrial machine he will never see. Later, in a small office with a coal stove, he speaks privately with one of the younger physicists, a man in his early 30s with ink-stained fingers. "Do you think," the man asks, "that the Americans truly have it?" Heisenberg does not want to crush him, but he cannot lie. They have built the capacity, he says. That is the hardest part. The younger man stares into the stove as if searching for answers in the coals. "Then we are finished," he says softly. Heisenberg does not correct the word. Finished. It is not only about a bomb. It is about the illusion that Germany can still change the war with science alone. On the return train, Heisenberg watches snow drift past the window. The wheels clatter over joints in the rails, a steady rhythm that feels like counting down. He thinks about what defeat looks like to scientists, not flags or surrender ceremonies, but a mental shift, a moment when you stop asking how to win and start asking how to survive what comes next. And in Berlin, in offices and cellars and quiet conversations over thin coffee, that shift is happening. Men who once spoke of uranium with excitement now speak of it with caution. They begin to hide papers. They begin to pack instruments. They begin to distance themselves from the dreams that brought them here. The admission is never announced. It is never written in a single sentence. It spreads like cold through a building, room by room. January 1945 arrives with a brittle cold that makes every sound sharper. In the mornings, Berlin's rubble crackles underfoot like burned sugar. The Institute's courtyard is coated in grey snow, and the men who still come to work do so with the same routine they once used for lectures and seminars. As if habit can anchor a world that is sliding away. Gerlach returns with new instructions. Not official orders in bold ink, but guidance passed in careful phrases. If the front comes closer, he says, sensitive materials must not be left for anyone to take. Anyone can mean many things now. The Americans, the British, the Soviets, or German agencies desperate enough to try last-minute experiments that will kill their own technicians. The word lets each listener choose the threat he fears most. Heisenberg understands what is being asked without being told. The program is no longer about success. It is about containment, about preventing chaos, about shaping what evidence will remain when the war is over and strangers walk through these rooms with clipboards and questions. In a basement storage area, technicians sort crates, vacuum tubes wrapped in newspaper, glassware cushioned with straw. Measuring devices that once seemed priceless now packed like refugees. Each item is tagged with a scribbled note. Destination unknown because the roads cannot be trusted. Diebner arrives unexpectedly, bringing two uniformed men who do not speak. Their coats are clean, their boots polished. They watch the laboratory with eyes that search for objects rather than ideas. We have orders to relocate certain components. Diebner says. He keeps his voice calm. Heisenberg hears the tension under the calm. The old rivalry pressed against a new urgency. Heisenberg asks, where? Diebner gives a location that means little. A facility near a forest. A warehouse. A place that can be defended for a few weeks, perhaps, if the roads do not fail and the fuel does not run out. The uniformed men begin lifting boxes without asking what is inside. One of the technicians tries to protest. Those instruments are delicate. They need stable power. They need a clean room. The uniformed man looks at him as if the words are foreign. Delicate is not part of his vocabulary. Heisenberg steps in. He does not shout. He does not need to. His authority here is not political, but it still exists. Careful, he says. If you break them, you will have carried nothing but scrap. The man hesitates, then adjusts his grip. It is a small victory, meaningless in the war, but it gives the room a moment of order. Later, in the cellar office, Heisenberg and Gerlach speak in low voices while the building above them creaks in the wind. They still want a miracle, Heisenberg says. Gerlach rubs his forehead. They want something they can report. He replies, a sentence that sounds like hope. Dieser. Heisenberg thinks of the memo and the folder and the American plants humming with power. He thinks of the younger physicist staring into the coal stove and saying, we are finished. Hope, Heisenberg says, is not a device you can assemble. Gerlach looks at him with the tired frankness of a man who has been balancing truth and survival for too long. Then we must decide what story we leave behind, he says. It is the most dangerous question in the room. In the following weeks, Heisenberg travels again to the south, where parts of the uranium work have been pushed into caves, barns, and repurposed workshops. The countryside looks calmer, but the calm is deceptive. Every bridge has guards. Every crossroads has a sign pointing refugees toward nowhere. The war is moving like a shadow across the hills. At one site, a small group works on the reactor assembly. The uranium cubes are stacked in careful geometry, hung on wires, arranged around a central space where they hope neutrons will multiply. Heavy water is rationed like medicine. The men speak in murmurs as they handle it, aware of how many raids and sabotage missions have already struck at this one ingredient. Heisenberg stands over the apparatus and feels the old instinct to fix problems, to adjust, to optimize. He asks questions. He checks measurements. He listens to explanations. For an hour, he is again what he was before the war demanded miracles, a physicist chasing understanding. Then the present returns. A messenger arrives with a note. It is brief. The front in the west is collapsing faster than expected. The Americans are crossing rivers that were once considered barriers. In the east, the Soviet advance grinds forward with a weight that cannot be stopped by speeches. That night, Heisenberg sits in a farmhouse room with a small window that looks out onto snowy fields. He opens a notebook and begins writing not calculations, but inventory. Names of people who should not be left behind. Places where records are stored. Items that must be destroyed if capture is imminent. He pauses at the word destroyed. He has spent his life creating knowledge. Now he is planning to erase traces of it. In the morning, he meets with the site leader, a practical engineer with grease under his fingernails. The engineer asks the question that everyone now asks in some form. If the enemy comes, what do we do with the cubes? He says. With the heavy water. Heisenberg answers carefully. You do not let them fall into careless hands, he says. But you also do not endanger your men for them. The engineer nods, relieved and ashamed at the same time. It is permission to choose life over equipment. As Heisenberg leaves, he looks back at the building. It is small, plain, surrounded by trees. It does not look like the birthplace of a world-changing weapon. It looks like a workshop trying to stay warm. He thinks again of America, of vast sites with fences and guard towers and rail spurs and whole rivers diverted to feed reactors. He imagines the scale and feels the finality of it. In late January, rumors circulate through the scientific circles like smoke. The Americans have a special laboratory in the desert. They have gathered the best minds. They are testing components. They are close. No one says these rumors loudly. They are shared in corridors, in train compartments, in whispered conversations while standing near stoves. They carry a strange tone, not only fear, but inevitability. And with inevitability comes a new focus. Not how to win, but what to preserve. Not the bomb, but the men. Not the program, but the narrative. In the quiet of cellars and farmhouses, German scientists begin making decisions that will shape what the world believes later. What was attempted, what was achieved, what was not. The war outside is loud. The work inside has become silent, deliberate, almost clerical. February 1945 brings a strange brightness to the south. Sunlight on snow that makes the world look clean while everything underneath is rotten. Heisenberg moves between sites with a small suitcase and a stack of papers that never leaves his sight. Each trip feels like walking a corridor that narrows with every step. In a village near one of the hidden facilities, he stops at a tavern that serves thin soup and black bread. The room is crowded with soldiers on leave who do not speak much. Their faces have the dull, steady look of men who have already accepted their own ending. A radio murmurs in the corner, its reception broken by static. When it catches a signal, it brings news of lost cities and retreating lines. A young officer recognizes Heisenberg and approaches. The officer's uniform is too big, his cheeks hollow. Herr Professor, he says, my superior says you are working on something decisive. Heisenberg studies him for a moment. The officer is not mocking. He is begging for a reason. Decisive, Heisenberg repeats softly. He thinks of the American industrial network, the reactors and enrichment plants and fabrication labs. He thinks of German rooms lit by lanterns and warmed by coal stoves. He thinks of trains stalled by bomb tracks and shipments that never arrive. We are working, he says, on understanding. That is all. The officer's face tightens. He nods once, like a man swallowing disappointment, then returns to his table. Heisenberg leaves the tavern with the cold air cutting his lungs. Outside, the village is quiet. Smoke rises from chimneys. A child drags a sled with no snow on it, scraping wood on frozen dirt. Life continues because it must, not because it believes. At the facility, the site leader meets him with a clenched expression. We received orders, the man says, to continue, to push, to report progress. Heisenberg asks, who sent them? The answer is vague. A ministry, a staff office, a signature that could be real or could be a ghost. In these months, authority is a shattered mirror. Heisenberg walks into the workroom. The reactor assembly stands like an unfinished sculpture. The uranium cubes hang in rows, dark and heavy, each one a testament to labor and paperwork and hope. The heavy water containers sit nearby, marked and guarded like treasure. The men look at him, waiting for the professor's judgment. Some still believe his words can change what the war demands. Heisenberg runs a hand along the edge of the apparatus, feeling cold metal under his fingertips. He listens to their latest measurements. He asks about leakage, about neutron economy, about shielding. He can still do the science. That is not what has failed. What has failed is everything around the science. When the discussion ends, he speaks quietly to the site leader. If we are forced to evacuate, he says, the priority is people, not equipment. The site leader exhales. He has been carrying that fear like a stone. And the records? The man asks. Heisenberg hesitates. This is the moment where the quiet admission turns into action. Records can be interpreted. Records can condemn. Records can also be misunderstood and turned into myths. Heisenberg chooses his words like he is stepping on ice. Preserve what explains our work accurately, he says. Remove what could be used recklessly. Do not let desperation create danger. The site leader nods, understanding more from tone than detail. Days later, Gerlach arrives, his car splattered with mud, his eyes rimmed red. He brings no folder this time. He brings a message. The Americans are in the West, he says. The Soviets are in the East. Berlin is breaking. The program will not survive intact. Heisenberg is silent. He expected this, and still the words land heavily. A program does not end with an announcement. It ends with roads closing, with fuel gone, with guards leaving their posts, with laboratories abandoned. Gerlach sits on a crate, shoulders sagging. We should think of what happens when they come for us, he says. They, again the word that can mean different flags. It also means investigators, interrogators, men who will ask why and how far and for whom. Heisenberg looks at the uranium cubes and feels a strange detachment. They are no longer a path forward. They are evidence of a path that led nowhere. We tell the truth, he says. Gerlach gives a tired smile. We tell a truth that can be heard, he replies. In March, the evacuations begin in earnest. Trucks arrive, then leave half empty because there is no fuel. Crates are loaded, then unloaded when a bridge is reported destroyed. Men argue, then stop arguing because there is no point. One evening, an air raid siren wails from a distant town. The workers freeze for a moment, listening, then continue packing. They have learned that fear does not change the schedule. Heisenberg gathers a small group of senior staff in a side room. Their faces are drawn, their hands raw from cold and work. We will disperse, he tells them. Some to the countryside, some to other institutes. Some will go home. Keep your notes with you. Do not carry anything you cannot explain. A younger man asks, should we destroy the apparatus? Heisenberg looks at him. The question is not technical. It is moral. If you must, he says. But do not risk lives to do it. That night, Heisenberg steps outside. The sky is clear. Stars hang over the dark hills. Indifferent. Somewhere far away. Artillery rumbles like distant surf. He imagines the United States, an ocean away, where factories run day and night, where power stations feed plants that produce enriched material, where laboratories assemble components under bright lights, where testing ranges wait in the open desert. He imagines the people there working with confidence, with supply, with time, and he understands with final clarity what he and his colleagues have quietly admitted since the day the folder arrived in the Berlin cellar. Their defeat is not simply that they did not build the weapon first. Their defeat is that they never had the world required to build it at all. In April, The German sites begin to fall into the hands of advancing forces. Guards vanish. Orders stop arriving. Telephones go dead. The war becomes local, then personal, then immediate. When the first foreign soldiers finally appear near one of the facilities, they move cautiously, rifles ready, eyes scanning for traps. They do not find a bomb. They find tired men, half-packed crates, and equipment that looks more like a laboratory than a fortress. Heisenberg is not there by then. He is already moving again, south and west, carrying his suitcase and his papers, heading toward whatever captivity will come. He does not know which uniform will stop him first, but he knows one thing with absolute certainty, a certainty born not of theory, but of those reports that changed everything. Across the Atlantic, the Americans have turned an idea into an industrial fact. In Germany, the idea has remained an experiment, a handful of cubes in cold rooms, a program starved by war and broken by its own conditions. And that is how scientists, quietly, admit defeat, not with speeches, not with flags, but with the moment they stop planning the future and start planning what to leave behind.